Welcome! I'm Christopher L. Bennett, and today I'll be reading the prologue to Arachne's Exile, the sequel to Arachne's Crime. So beware spoilers for Arachne's Crime. Also, a content warning, brief discussion of assault and miscarriage, and a bad accent too. So let's get started. Don't get too close to the edge, Sita. I'm fine, Neely, Sita Batiani said absently as she leaned further over the railing, gauging the distance to the water in the canal below. If I couldn't handle being on edges, I'd never have signed on to Arachne, would I? Ranilanath hopped over to Sita, resting her blue-skinned, kangaroo-like body on its thick tail and rotating her chameleon-esque eyes downward to lock onto the diminutive xenobiologist. I'm glad that you've resolved to overcome your fear, my friend, but don't overdo it. Is the most alien place you've seen so far. The young Chiron was right about that up to a point. All the migration fleet's previous rest stops in the first few days of the journey from Shillerlal had been at other Chiron-built space habitats, variants on the cylindrical design that had come to feel almost familiar to Sita over the past 6 months, though she would never forget her first sight of one as a torn-open ruin, when the survivors of the Leshchi habitat had pulled Arachne's crew from their hibernation dreams and forced them to behold the devastation they had carelessly wrought in their haste. The habitat called St, of all things, was a modest-sized megastructure orbiting the giant star Theta Scorpii over 270 light-years from Solstice and nearly as far from Shillerlal. It resembled a vast, elongated mollusk shell, a conical double helix with the wider end facing the star as it rotated around its long axis. This gave it a continuum of centrifugal gravity levels, from below lunar at its tapered end to several times Earth's at its fat end. The canal Sita studied ran down its entire spiraling length, the water flowing downhill due to both the slope and the gravity gradient, then refiltered and pumped back up through the central axis. On disembarking for the night, Senior Mediator Lechelin had brought her Arachnan charges to a Chiron-compatible gravity level occupied only by familiar species such as Chiron and Seekers of the Zenith. Now, not many of them at that. It made sense that the caravan crew would choose these comfortable environs for their rest break. But not for the first time, Sita had trouble shaking the feeling that the mediators were carefully controlling the Arachnans' access to information about the larger galaxy. The human colonists, well, most of them, had accepted culpability for Leshchi's destruction, agreeing to assimilate into Chiron society to repay their debt as contributing members. So why did those responsible for their education shy away from important topics such as galactic history and sociology? The temptation to strip her kit off, dive in, and let the canal's current carry her down to more exotic levels, populated by who knew what kind of novel alien sophonts, was tempered only by Sita's realization that the strong current would sweep her lightweight body away like a leaf. Being the size of an average 12-year-old was bollocks sometimes. At least no one will mistake me for a pre-adolescent dressed like this, she thought, glancing down at the open-fronted Chiron-style vest she'd finally started wearing, the two-strap variety, a bit more modest than the usual one-strap design, but bringing out her cleavage more, much to the appreciation of her husband. But she hadn't started wearing it out of vanity. Ever since the Leshchi disaster and the subsequent assault she'd suffered from her vengeful captors, Sita had lived in fear of the Chiron, a fear that had overridden her natural fascination with alien life, and kept her secluded in the Arachnans' probationary enclave for months. The Leshchan refugee's second, more recent assault, resulting in the death of her unborn baby, had only worsened her terror and her guilt, for she had been one of the women whose inadvertent intrusion on a solemn Leshchan procreative ritual called a kiss dance had triggered their retaliation. But the Arachnans' administrator Oyama Kazuko, whose miscarriage had not been her first, had been a bastion of strength for Sita and the other bereaved parents, including Kazuko's platonic parenting partner Ravinder Pratam, as well as astrophysicist Justine Wen, who had been carrying one of the expedition's 600 frozen, pre-fertilized embryos. But Sita had already spent months in hiding after the first attack, and the support of Kazuko and Justine had helped her find the conviction to seize onto the migration as a new beginning, to move beyond her fears and embrace discovery once again. Though she and Stephen had grown closer in recent days, following months of tension over their differing attitudes toward the children, Sita now felt more capable of functioning on her own, seeing her husband's strength as a supplement to her own rather than a substitute for it. The Chiron wardrobe symbolized her acceptance of her new life as part of their community, and her willingness to put herself out there once more. Literally, she thought, scratching under her right breast. She studied Ranilanath thoughtfully, considering that she was large enough for Sita to ride on her back, and that the Chiron had evolved from aquatic ancestors. "Nilly, you're a really good swimmer, right?" The apprentice mediator gave a snort of distress through the array of small nares atop her snout, ruffling the small bristles that surrounded them. "Oh, no, Sita. Don't even conceive the words, let alone spawn them. We're on a schedule, and I don't dare risk delaying things by getting you lost. And here I thought you were the adventurous one. It's not like there's even much to see out there. It's a very old habitat, not used much anymore. It's mainly just a way station in the wormhole network." Sita stared. "That just makes me more curious. Why do people stop using it? Where do they all go? Not just here, but all through this space." Nilly fidgeted. "Well, people migrate, like we're doing. Sometimes they just drift away from somewhere for a while." The London native crossed her arms and held the Chiron's gaze. "Seriously, Nilly, what's got into you lot? Not just you, but the whole caravan. I've seen your body language, not just here, but at all our rest stops. You don't have the confidence you had before. You're tentative, restless, like you're searching for something." Sita looked away. "At first I thought I was just projecting my own state of mind onto you." "The state of mind you're overcompensating for by leaning too close to the edge," Nilly reminded her. "Ah, right, I get it." She stepped back from the railing, and the two friends began to stroll alongside it at a more comfortable distance. Nilly's stroll was much like a kangaroo's slow walk, using her arms and tail as a tripod when moving her long legs forward. It angled her torso downward, keeping her silver-maned head at Sita's eye level. "It's the migration," the apprentice remarked after a moment. "Not just the physical one, but the transition from their old guilds to this one. They've left behind their old consensus memories and thoughts, taken on new ones. They're still finding out what their new personalities are like." Sita understood. A migratory species, long-lived and serially hermaphroditic, the Chiron had always seen identities and allegiances as fluid, evolving things. Their minds existed as much in their habitat's information clouds as in their own skulls, and their personalities were shaped by the memories and processing algorithms they shared with others in their guilds. Moving to a new habitat or career meant altering one's personality, leaving pieces of oneself behind and assimilating new ones. Her hands moved reflexively to her belly. "Like they've lost a part of themselves," she whispered, "and aren't quite sure who they are anymore." Nilly's eyes swiveled in surprise. "I hadn't thought of it that way. It's hard to understand what you and the others are going through. So few of us have had babies, let alone lost them. And memories that painful aren't always shared with the consensus." She lowered her brow ridges in thought. "But I guess if a baby is something that's both part of you and outside of you, that's a bit like a consensus memory. I understand that now that I'm sharing fully in the Migration Guild's consensus. I'm like the others, still figuring out who I am now." Sita's restlessness returned. "But at least you have something to fill the void. That makes it easier." "I don't know about that," Nilly said. "There are migrants from many guilds and estates. It takes lots of different skills to build a new world. Every estate has people seeking transition to a new life, so we had no trouble finding recruits. But they all come with different habits of thought. They don't leave all of it behind. We're still testing out each other's memories and modes of thinking, seeing how they change us." She snuffled unhappily. "It's hard to put it in human terms." "You don't seem to have changed that much. Neither have Lechellan and Broadwing. Well, intersocietal is the core of the Migration Guild. Nearly half the Collegium came along." "Makes sense. They literally share the same thoughts about the reasons behind the move." "Not the same exactly. But mediators are generalists to begin with. Our thought patterns are tailored to be malleable and eclectic. Well, compared to the sheer norm," she admitted with an amused drumming of her toes. "So all that influx of new ideas hasn't changed Lechellan or Broadwing that much." "And yourself?" She shook her short mane, a cheering smile. "I'm a kid. Everything's new to me. Besides, I'm finally a full guild member. I'm an adult now. Make up your mind. Are you a kid or an adult?" "Can't I be both?" Nilly asked. Sita laughed out loud for the first time since the attack. She threw her arms around Nilly's neck and hugged her warmly. "You be whatever you want, love. Just don't ever stop being you."